Bernie, AOC, Mandani are not Democrats. They'll be the first to tell you that. They're democratic socialists, and that's a very different thing, and I don't think people know that yet. The DSA are radicals about this concept, and radical economic policy is always ineluctably married to radical social policy. Their platform, for example, calls for completely open borders. They're for what Biden was doing, but more. You think you're going to win an election on that? James Carville knew how to win, and he blamed the Democratic losses this November 2nd on stupid wokeness, to which AOC fired back that wokeness is a term almost exclusively used by older people these days. So that should tell you all you need to know. What? This is a term folks like you brought out very recently and had been proudly displaying at every march since. Just last year, The Guardian declared woke the word of our era. I guess they didn't get the memo from the Mean Girls Club. We don't use that emoji anymore. Woke, please. We say fetch.
Bernie Sanders and AOC are firmly in Bill Maher's crosshairs as he breaks down why their political strategies keep falling short. Sanders hasn't given up on his presidential ambitions, and AOC, while keeping her plans vague, clearly wouldn't mind a shot herself. Yet for reasons that are becoming harder to ignore, their paths forward keep running into walls. Maher opens the door on why their momentum keeps stalling and why their approach may be part of the problem. So as always, hit subscribe and let's dive in.
Democratic socialism is like a dating profile. Things look great until you meet up in the real world. For example, Bernie Sanders, his big thing was always bringing single-payer health care to our country of 340 million. But when liberal tie-dyed Vermont tried to do it for a population of 626,000, it collapsed like that poor in the Oval Office last week.
According to Maher, Bernie Sanders struggles because his policies don't translate into broad electoral support. While Bernie may not embrace the label, Maher argues that his positions are widely associated with socialism, from heavy taxes on the wealthy to single-payer healthcare. These ideas may energize progressive circles, but they clash with how much of the public views government power. Maher points to Sanders' home state of Vermont, where attempts at single-payer healthcare ran into serious obstacles and failed to deliver what was promised. For Maher, it's a cautionary tale. Big ideas sound powerful, but they don't guarantee political success when voters fear sweeping government overreach.
I think people realize we already have a lot of socialism. Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, unemployment insurance, food stamps, veterans benefits, Pell Grants, COVID-era payments, farm subsidies, disability payments, Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, corporate bailouts, and the jobs program that is building weapons the Pentagon doesn't even want. All that is social.
Maher also says the Democratic Socialist label itself has become a major problem for Sanders and AOC. In the eyes of many voters, it separates them from traditional Democrats. While Democrats usually push reforms within capitalism, Democratic Socialists advocate far more government involvement in the economy. And for a lot of Americans, the word socialist still carries heavy baggage, raising fears about economic instability and lost freedoms. Even when Sanders and AOC soften their policies, the label alone can trigger resistance from moderates and swing voters. In Maher's view, that identity may excite their base but limits their national appeal.
DSA are radicals about this concept, and radical economic policy is always ineluctably married to radical social policy. Their platform, for example, calls for completely open borders. They're for what Biden was doing, but more. You think you're going to win an election on that? This just seems like more extremism at a time when Americans are begging both parties, please, could just one of you act normal?
Maher explains that much of the hesitation toward Democratic Socialists is rooted in fear. Fear that giving them power could lead to even bigger problems. Voters already feel uneasy about immigration, inflation, and government spending. Maher suggests many Americans look at Biden's border struggles and worry that Democratic Socialist policies would expand government control even further. So while voters may criticize Biden, they may still see him as safer compared to what Sanders or AOC might implement. That contrast helps explain why their support struggles to grow beyond their progressive base.
It's either defund the police or military in the streets. Either MAGA's crypto crony capitalism or city-run grocery stores No, I don't want that. I want a Democrat who reassures me if you like your Whole Foods, you can keep your Whole Foods.
Maher makes his own stance clear. He supports capitalism, a system where people control their choices, reap the rewards, and face the consequences. He argues that this model encourages innovation, responsibility, and opportunity in a way government-driven systems simply can't. For many Americans, that belief is at the core of the American dream. Anyone, regardless of background, can succeed through effort and determination. Maher believes socialism weakens that promise by centralizing power and limiting personal freedom. For him, defending capitalism is defending individual opportunity and self-determination.
Lex Spanberger once said about Biden's presidency that, quote, nobody elected him to be FDR. They elected him to be normal. Normal! You know, at this year's DSA convention, or as it's commonly known, Comic-Con, get this, you had to submit a photo of a negative COVID test to get in. In 2025. Yeah, no one wants to do that shit again. We've had enough of Trump's macho bullshit and also enough of politics.
Maher also criticizes Sanders and AOC for failing to assert leadership and instead catering too heavily to activist pressure. He points to moments where both embraced activist energy rather than guiding it. They've headlined massive rallies against corporate power, amplifying chants instead of steering messaging toward broader voters. In other cases, far-left factions accuse them of not being progressive enough, especially on issues like Israel and Palestine, forcing them into reactive positions. Maher argues that instead of leading, they often merge with the loudest voices in the room, making it harder to connect with moderates.
Democratic socialists at another of their conventions, they were told to make jazz hands instead of clapping, lest some delegates suffer sensory overload. And also, and I'm not joking, they were told not to be wearing, any aggressive scents.
Please don't go into that space with anything that's like an aggressive scent, for instance, right? Because that's going to be difficult for people.
Oh, for fuck's sake.
Maher says this activist-driven messaging is exactly what he expected Sanders and AOC to challenge, not embrace. He highlights the absurdity of some activist norms, like incidents where people were instructed how to clap in specific ways to avoid sensory overload. His point is simple. When even clapping becomes complicated, something has gone too far. Leaders, he argues, should question these trends instead of accepting them blindly. By failing to do so, Sanders and AOC risk alienating voters who find this behavior confusing or excessive.
This is who the Democrats are thinking of following. Chuck Schumer ain't perfect, but at least he doesn't crumple into a heap when confronted with Chanel number 5. You may now clap in the traditional way. Thank you.
Interestingly, Maher even praises Chuck Schumer here, despite criticizing him in the past. The reason reveals a lot about the current Democratic divide. Maher notes that Schumer at least pushes back against certain activist pressures. A key example is Schumer's public warnings about rising anti-Semitism within parts of the American left. He openly condemned slogans and rhetoric he felt crossed the line, even when it came from his own party. For Maher, this willingness to push back shows leadership that Sanders and AOC often avoid.
Is the party that supports so many issues that benefit the middle class still considered out of touch by 62% of Americans? In plain English, nobody likes a snob. Hillary Clinton didn't have anyone on rural research or outreach when she ran in 2016 until the race tightened just before the election. Then they hired one. And where was his office? Brooklyn. True story. Politics is local, not locally sourced. It's not artisan. It's art and...
Beyond activist messaging, Maher argues that Democratic leadership has become disconnected from everyday voters. Instead of focusing on inflation, healthcare, and public safety, the party seems overly focused on pleasing its loudest factions. Maher believes this obsession with woke signaling leads to grandstanding rather than governing. It pushes away moderates and frustrates people who just want practical solutions. In his view, by prioritizing ideology over results, Democrats risk losing both elections and credibility.
Carville knew how to win, and he blamed the Democratic losses this November 2nd on stupid wokeness. To which AOC fired back that wokeness is a term almost exclusively used by older people these days. So that should tell you all you need to know. What? This is a term folks like you brought out very recently and had been proudly displaying at every march since. Just last year, The Guardian declared woke the word of our era. I guess they didn't get the memo from the Mean Girls Club. We don't use that emoji anymore. Woke, please. We say fetch.
Maher finds it especially telling that AOC now tries to distance herself from the term woke, even though it has defined much of her public image. From progressive policies to activist-driven causes, her actions have firmly tied her to that movement. Maher argues that rejecting the label while continuing the behavior only highlights the disconnect between how she wants to be seen and how voters actually see her. Whether she likes the term or not, her brand remains closely linked to progressive activism. And that's where we wrap up today's video. If you enjoyed it, hit like and subscribe for more. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.